All right, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday night board update. I'm Andrea Miller, and tonight we are going to be joined by Lulu Friesdat. I've known Lulu for years. We've worked together in what used to be called election integrity. Now it's election protection and election transparency. We want to begin tonight looking at what all of us can do in our own towns, in our own counties. We are all the target districts when it comes to securing elections and making sure that all the votes that we have worked so hard to turn out are actually counted as intended when they were cast. So, Lulu, I'm going to have you go ahead and get started with your presentation. Lulu, take it away.
Hi, so great to be here with you. So I just want to just say hello first and introduce myself, and I will pull up my slides just so that you can, to help you have information about me. Let's see, so that I'm going to share my screen. And there you go. And I am an election security journalist. I've been covering election security for over 10 years now. And I started out as a documentary filmmaker. I'm still a filmmaker and a journalist. But what happened was I made a film about why more people don't vote and participate in politics. And one of the reasons that people said to me they didn't vote was that they didn't believe their votes were counted. And during the course of the film, we investigated a lot of different reasons why people said they didn't vote. And I said, I wonder, are votes being counted accurately? Or, are there problems with that? And I started investigating it. And the more I looked into it, the more stunned I became, upset and concerned that votes were potentially not being counted accurately. I filmed one of the first hacks of a US voting machine, which was by J. Alex Halderman and another grad student at Princeton in 2007. And they had hacked a voting machine that's still in use today in, I think, over a dozen states. We all voted on the machine, and then they printed out the results. And the results were different from the candidate that we had all chosen. And it was really kind of like a watershed moment for me. I went, oh my God. And I just understood so clearly how, if that was happening in multiple locations across the country, that the votes really could be endangered. And so I've actually spent really most of my career since that time really focusing on this issue. I've done investigations with over 4 million views. I did work in network news for over 2 decades, actually, with all the major news channels, although it was very hard to persuade them to look into this issue. And because of that, I recently, last year, co-founded and am the executive director of a project called Smart Elections. And let's see if I can get these to work. Oh, so I'm going to talk about data. I'll just tell you, Smart Elections is we're an election reform project, and our mission statement is elevating election reform to an urgent national priority, which we really, really think it needs to be. And I'm really, really glad to be here with Andrea, because Andrea has just done so much amazing work in this film. She's an inspiration to me. And one of the things that makes me so happy is that you're doing this project, Let Me Vote, Count My Vote. Andrea is one of the few people in the voting rights community that really understands it's not enough to just vote. We have to actually make sure those votes are counted. So I'm going to be talking tonight about data. And data can seem kind of boring, but I'm going to tell you a little anecdote about data that is able to communicate just exactly how powerful it is. And I'm going to talk about my husband. So when I got married, I've been with my husband for a long time now. And when I first moved in with him, I found, as many women do, that there was not an even division of the housework. In fact, I was doing a lot more of the housework. And my husband is, you know, progressive, and he wants for us to be equal. And it was just kind of an unconscious thing. I think he just didn't realize it. And so what I did was I created an Excel sheet, a spreadsheet, and we started tracking how much I did and how much he did. And anything counted. If you washed the dishes, or if you planned a birthday party for our mother-in-law, whatever, if it was for the house, it went in the chart. And what we found in the chart was not only was I doing more, I was doing a lot more. And we could tell pretty much exactly how much more, how many more hours per week I was doing. And what happened was, as soon as my husband discovered this and had the actual data, the metrics in front of him, his behavior changed radically. He actually just started helping more. And now he actually does almost all the cooking, almost all the grocery shopping, and most of the cleaning. So it's been a huge breakthrough for me, because I've been able to do a lot more in my career because I have the support. And this was all from one Excel sheet, one chart that I made. And this is just to say that data is not boring. Data is powerful. And we cannot really repair things that we cannot name and understand. Those are really the first steps to repairing things. And gathering data is part of naming something and understanding it. So we want to gather data about our elections. And I'm going to start sharing my screen again and take you through some of the data that I want to talk about. So one thing I want to keep in mind that is just really important is that, and can you see my full screen? Because I can't tell, because I kind of have my,
Yes.
You can see my full screen. Okay. So one of the problems with our elections is that they're partisan, and they're run by partisan individuals. The elections across the US in general are run by the Democratic and the Republican Party, depending on who's in charge. Sometimes one party dominates, sometimes it's more of an equal, an equal sharing of power, but the parties are biased. The parties are not there to conduct fair and equitable elections. The parties are there to make sure that their candidates win. So they have an inherent problem there. And I got this great quote in an interview I did with Professor Pippa Norris of Harvard, and she called it a pure conflict of interest. And what we should understand is that other democracies do not do this. In other democracies, for example, in Australia, they have an independent election commission. And you can see, this is a quote from their website, they place special emphasis on political neutrality to provide Australians with an independent electoral service. So that's where we need to go in the future. That's where we need to think long term, is we need to have neutral elections if possible. I want to talk to you a little bit about election results, because we all want to believe that the election results are accurate. That's what we were taught in school. We were taught, like, Americans do democracy and apple pie and fireworks. Like, those are our specialties, and we do them right. But the fact of the matter is that we actually have many, many problems with our elections. And some of the elections that I'm going to talk about right here are ones where we have actual documentation that the results were incorrect. So I'm going to start with very recent elections. This is just not an election was incorrect, but just so we know we're all talking about the same thing. This is an example of a ballot. Most of you are going to be completely familiar with this type of ballot. This is a hand-marked paper ballot where people who are able to mark by hand just fill in their candidates, the candidate that they want, with a bubble. So I'm going to start out by talking about the election in Georgia in 2020. And this was the primary. And, oh dear, I think my slides are incomplete. Hang on one second. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 minute and check, because I'm not seeing the slide that I just had there earlier. Oh no, we have these. Okay, great. So, get us going again. Okay, so in Georgia in 2020, the scanners did not count the votes correctly. And there were thousands of votes that were not counted. And the way that this was discovered, so I just want to think about, when you fill out you fill out that paper ballot, you fill in that oval, and you expect that it's going to be counted accurately, you probably don't even really think about like what happens after you fill it out. Like, how does it technically get counted? There's a lot of steps in between. So you put your ballot into a scanner. For the most part in this country, we do not count ballots by hand. Machines count those ballots. So when you put it into the scanner basically, depending on how it works, often translates it by what's known as optical character recognition, OCR. And it can be set to different sensitivities. So just think of it like your printer. You know, sometimes your printer prints out really dark and sometimes your printer prints out really light. That's a setting. So the scanner can also have a setting of what it's reading. So, and that's called the target area. So, and I think I can go back into my slideshow view. It's gonna take us back through some of these. So, I don't know why when I'm in this view, it's not showing me the slides I want to see. That's weird. So we'll just go back to this other view because they are here. And you're seeing my screen, right?
Right.
Okay. So they pick up this target area. So in Georgia in 2020, their scanners had been set to count a vote if it was 35% or more. That's pretty high. That means that if you didn't fill it in super dark, it didn't count your vote. And it absolutely did not count anything below 12%. And if it was below 12 or 35%, they sent it to this adjudication panel, which is how this was discovered. So one of our contacts, Jean Dufort, who works with a group, Coalition for Good Governance, she was on one of these election review panels. And what they found, they were getting all of these ballots, much more than they usually get. And they were even finding that many ballots that were not being directed to them, when they would pull up another ballot, they would see that the machine had not counted the vote. So it was these votes that were not apparently, filled in hard enough. And it was also other votes, and they didn't know why, but the machine was not counting thousands of votes. And so eventually they did change this. This is a quote from the attorney for the Georgia Board of Elections, who acknowledged that when those marks were between 20 and 35%, every time they looked at it, it was clearly the intent of the voter to make a selection. So they knew these were valid votes. Even so, in that 2020 primary, they did not go back in many counties and count those votes. Those votes remained uncounted. They have not been counted to this day. And this is just one incident. So, and you have to also, this is probably an accident that this happened, but you have to imagine this capability. It could be used deliberately. If you had counties where you didn't want the votes to be registered to a higher percentage, you could set that scanning percentage very high. And if you had a county where you wanted the votes counted, you could set that percentage quite low. And that goes back to what I talked about earlier, which is that our elections are run by partisan election officials who have an agenda, unfortunately, and their agenda is that their candidate will win. So we cannot think that these problems will not be taken advantage of. They quite possibly will be taken advantage of. And I just want to take you through a couple other examples. As far as we can tell, we've researched elections all over the country, and there are many, many elections which are not being counted accurately. So this is another example. This is Broward County, Florida. And this was for the 2018 election, the general election. This was an incredibly tight election, which some of you may remember was so tight that the governor, the Senate race, and I believe the agricultural commissioner all went to hand recounts. And yet there was an official audit done, and that's actually very rare, but this race was so problematic in Broward County that they did this official audit. And what they found was half of the precincts reported more votes cast than voters on election day in more than half of the precincts. Now just think about that. You should have the same number of voters and votes. That is just basic. That is part of democracy. One voter, one vote. But what they are saying is in this audit, half of the precincts reported more votes than voters. That's a problem. They actually found many, many other problems. Recount results were submitted late. Had the recount results been accepted, they would have reflected an underreporting of 2,335 ballots, which were misplaced and not included in the recount. Overall, they concluded there was an overall lack of standard operating procedures. Based on the totality of these issues, we are unable to provide assurance over the accuracy of the November 2018 election results as reported. They are literally saying in this official audit, we don't know who won. This is really, really shocking. And this was a race, as I said, that was so close. Think about this. This was a Senate race, and we know how close that Senate race was that put a Republican into the Senate. And now we know that that Republican Senate is going to appoint a Supreme Court justice on a very, very narrow margin. So that is how important these votes are. These votes that we don't know what happened to them could be making incredibly important decisions that reverberate and reflect and grow in terms of their importance. I'm just going to give you one other one. This is one that's also pretty shocking. This is on a touchscreen machine, not a hand-marked paper ballot system. This is a new system that's being sold all over the country, the Express Vote XL. It's a huge touchscreen machine. And when it launched in Pennsylvania, it literally lost tens of thousands of votes. So what happened was the machine, this was in an election for a judge's race, the machine showed that Abe Casas had 164 votes out of 55,000, which was actually just sort of impossible because of the way that Philadelphia politics are and the straight party ticket voting. They realized immediately that this was ludicrous. When it actually, they had to hand count these ballots. And when they counted them, they found that Mr. Casas won with 26,000 votes. So that's a lot of votes that got lost. These are not small amounts of votes that are being lost. This man went from 164 votes to 26,000 votes. Okay, so I can see that you're impacted by that. So what can be done? Okay, that's where you and Andrea's leadership and our project all come together. We are trying to address this. And oh wait, I'm going to show you one more because this one is really shocking also. This is one from 2015 Memphis. This is one that Benny Smith, who's one of our technical advisors, a computer programmer and an election commissioner himself, found this Memphis poll tape. So the poll tapes, and this gets into the project that we're working on. We're going to be working with poll tapes because they're a very important piece of evidence, going back to that idea of data and how important data can be. So voting machines produce a number of pieces of data. And this is one of them, the poll tape. And we can check these poll tapes and see if they're accurate. And it doesn't check everything, but it does check one part of the system. So this was a poll tape that Benny found in 2015. He went and took a photograph of it after it was posted at one of the precincts where he lives in Memphis, Tennessee. And he just kept that photograph, and it showed that there were 548 voters there at his precinct total. And then he went and looked up when the certified results were reported, and he noticed that in the certified results, only 330 total votes were reported in that precinct. And he was like, what? That's strange. And then he went down and he saw that all of the candidates were underreported. Now, this was a predominantly African-American precinct. And when they did an investigation, they found that there were 4 other predominantly African-American precincts where the votes somehow had not transferred accurately from the polling tape, which was produced that night, to the final certified results. And it was about 1,000 votes that were lost there. So one of the things that we're doing in our project now, it's called Count the Vote. And one of the things that we're doing is we're teaching people how to photograph poll tapes. It's something that almost anyone can do. And it's very important to do it on election night. You can request the poll tapes later as a public records request from the election officials. But what we're trying to do is to document that evidence as close to the moment when it comes out of the machine as possible. Because after that, a lot of things happen to the votes. They go through different systems. They get put on flash drives. Usually they get transported. Sometimes they get relayed over Wi-Fi lines. A lot of times there's modems in the voting machines that relay the votes over Wi-Fi lines, which could be intercepted. They go up on websites. Websites can be hacked. Websites can lose data. So there's like all these different steps. And what you want to make sure is that those votes from the actual poll tape wind up being reported accurately when they get through all of that tabulation process and come out on the other end as certified results, or even as preliminary election night results. We want to keep comparing these pieces of data and making sure that they're accurate. Remember, data is very powerful, and if we have the evidence that the votes are not accurate, then we can save those votes. We can make sure that those votes get counted the way that Benny did. They took that photograph actually into court, and they made sure that those votes in those predominantly Black precincts did get counted. So this can be very meaningful work. The other things that we're teaching people to do are do public records request of digital ballot images. So I showed you that image of a ballot, a hand-marked paper ballot in the beginning. What I showed you is actually what's called a digital ballot image, and it's a photograph that the machine makes when it scans your ballot. And one thing we can do is request copies of those. It's better to look at the actual paper ballots themselves, but it's actually very, very hard to get hold of the paper ballots. The election officials generally do not want anyone touching them. There's often many laws around who can look at them, who can touch them. But sometimes it's possible to get the digital ballot images. And so we can do public records requests and we can look at those. And there's different technologies that have been developed to allow us to count those digital ballots rapidly now. A really bright engineer called Ray Lutz has developed a system called Audit Engine. And you can also just get together in a group and do counts of these digital ballot images. It's kind of fun, actually. You project them up on a huge projector on the wall, like a movie, and then you can just like click through them pretty rapidly, and everybody in the room can see them. And you can each have clickers, like you can click for one candidate, someone else clicks for another candidate. Usually you do them in about a batch of 25. You get through those 25 and everybody goes, did you get everybody compares, did they get the same count? And if so, then you move on to the next batch. So you can kind of rapidly count these votes in groups. And it's another way of checking that the results are accurate. That's what all of this is about making sure every vote is counted. And then you can also do public records requests for other kinds of data. It can be as simple as just sending a quick email, or it can be something that's more formal. Like this is a public records request that I did in 2016. I did a public records request in Broward County, again, a very problematic county, and we actually found lots and lots of problems there. And this was the first public records request that I did. I said, we seek to examine all the Broward County ballots of Florida's 23rd Congressional District from the August 30th, 2016 Democratic primary as they are stored. And then I went on to make some more specific requests. I actually worked with an attorney on this because I had done a simple public request that they ignored, and it took us about 3 times, and then we actually finally went to court on this. And then they actually destroyed the ballots rather than let us look at them. And then actually after that, finally they did fire Brenda Snipes, who was the supervisor of elections. So even if you don't always get what you want, sometimes you get the next best thing, which is maybe a change of election officials. And sometimes that's what it takes. So Brenda Snipes has been replaced now. Broward County is still having problems with their elections, but we are continuing to, do audits there and try to figure out what's wrong. In Memphis, Tennessee, where Benny found that poll tape, it was really a breakthrough what happened. They actually, this was back in Memphis, they did go to court. They were not able to change the results of those elections, but they did get a new election administrator finally after, I think it had been about 10 years. And what was just bizarre, that election administrator had presided over a series of elections that white Republicans had won over and over again in a really predominantly Black county. Shelby County is predominantly Democratic, predominantly Black, and had somehow mysteriously elected white Republican candidates over and over again under this election official. So after this polling tape was discovered, that election administrator resigned. They got a new election administrator, and in the following countywide election, the county somehow elected 9 Black women, a full slate of Black female Democratic candidates all of a sudden. And that was all really that came out of this poll tape. So this can be incredibly powerful work. And I'm really excited to say that the organizations that Andrea is working with have joined us. And what I'll show you now, I think I'm gonna stop this share, and I think I can share my website. Let me just get it to the one that I want to show you first. So, just want to show you this site first. Technology, so much fun. There it is. Okay, good. It popped up that time. Okay, so this is the project that we're doing to teach people how to do this, and we're hoping that you're going to want to participate in this. As I said, it can be incredibly powerful. So this is our website, smartelections.us, and you can go there and you can just click on the Take Action menu and select Count the Vote, and it'll take you to this website. And you can see our partners here, and you can see that Center for Common Ground is listed, People Demanding Action, and Reclaim Our Vote. And we're very proud to have your logos up here in our logo section. Here's the Reclaim Our Vote. And these are some of the other groups that we're working with, election groups all over the country, People Demanding Action, and our group also. And then we've also partnered with this group called CSAY 2020. And this is really amazing. So I want to show you, this is their national map. This is just going to explode this work. We are so excited about partnering with this particular project, because what they do, they have a lot of, they're working with a big tech company called Esri, and they have a lot of bandwidth servers, and they've developed this map. And what they did with it in 2018, you can see these different things on the side. Are you still seeing my screen? So these were places where they had, are you seeing my screen still?
Lulu,
yeah.
This is on my board. We are very familiar with this.
Okay.
We used it in 2018.
Fantastic. So what's great is that Deepak has now added, so the map maps different voting issues. So they've now added a new issue, and the new issue that they've added now is poll tapes. So we're going to be able to map the poll tapes, and this is a tremendously powerful tool. We're going to have our own map for the poll tapes, and they'll be able to come into a centralized location, and they have a lot of bandwidth, as I've said, because poll tapes are just like, it's a huge amount of data to process. They have paid interns who are going to be able to look at them, get them organized. We're going to have codes with them to organize them by state, by precinct, and get them. Also, they have technology that translates the image into text, so we can get it into spreadsheets, and we can start immediately, in almost real time, hopefully, comparing them to election results. That is the key, to be able to rapidly compare these to the election results as they're being reported, so that in real time or close to real time, we can start to find problems, because there's such a narrow window there between when you find a problem and when the election is going to be certified. We have a very narrow window where we can actually do something about this. And so working with Deepak is, and their organization, CSAY 2020, is going to just really exponentially expand what we're able to do. So we're hoping that you're going to be part of this. We really want your involvement, and I'm ready to take any questions if Andrea thinks that's a good idea.
The Q&A is going to be very, very short. The Dem Labs is actually Deepak's company. See Something, Say Something is the product that I named back in 2018. So as I said, we have an intimate knowledge of that, and the interns and their fearless leader, Sandy Radoff, are our Students for Justice interns. So, yes, we've got 45 of our interns who are part of this project that is cool and fun. So, yes, and there will be other opportunities as we ramp up the training and the need for other people to do monitoring. So I'm going to be having a meeting with the folks who are organizing a lot of the things for See Something, Say Something, and then we will be putting out a request to all of our membership to find out who else would be interested in joining us in monitoring. We're going to be monitoring social media. We're going to be monitoring a lot of different things. So this tool literally is 10 times as robust as when Deepak first spec'd in 2018. This is going to really be a tremendous benefit and force to be reckoned with. I will also be sharing a graphic that we are going to ask everybody to put out on social media for that. So that is really, really great. Now, Lulu, make sure you put links to those websites in the chat, please. Please, okay. please.
I'll do that. And can I really encourage people to get on our mailing list? We are at smartelections.us, and you can just go there, and on the front page, there's a place to put in your email address. We've been having election protection forums every 2 weeks, and you can go to our YouTube channel, and I'll put the YouTube channel in the chat, and you can watch, especially the last one that we just did, I already put into the chat, and I'll put it into the chat again. And that one is an hour-long program that explains this in more detail, really explains how we're doing. But get on our mailing list, and even just email me directly. I'll put my email into the chat. And so you can just reach out to me at contact@smartelections.us. If you think that your group would like to do this, then we'll do our best to get you on board. And we're trying to put together a database of all the different regulations and statutes that apply. Every state is different. Sometimes even every county is different. So it's complicated, and you have to make sure that you're doing it appropriately and legally, and letting the Board of Election officials know in advance. You don't want to get arrested. You don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to be thought that you're one of these vigilantes, you know, that's coming and trying to intimidate anybody. So this all has to be done very, very carefully and correctly. And it is the best way to explain this to people is that you are trying to make sure that every vote is counted. We are not challenging the election. We are not trying to stop the election. We are trying to protect people's votes and make sure that every vote is counted.
One of the questions in the chat is, at the end of every session, everyone who signed up on our event link will receive notes from this particular presentation. So you will get a link to the recording. You will also get all the websites and all the information that was shared in the chat. So you'll be able to have all that. Lulu, Benny Smith is here. So I want Benny is here. Benny, I want you to say hi to everybody. Benny, unmute, please. You can unmute yourself. I made you a co-host.
Hello, everybody.
This is Benny Smith. So for those of you who are not election protection geeks, Benny was the man who discovered fraction magic, among other things, that on digital voting machines where you're pressing buttons to vote, it isn't one vote per person, one person, one vote. It's one person is 100/100ths of a vote. So as we discovered, it was designed to deal. So Benny, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, or if you want to talk about the Hold A projects.
Yeah, I can cover them both. Basically, the storyline of how I got into the election protection movement. Um, I'm a financial software developer by trade, and I've done predictive analysis on voter turnout. So I'm usually involved with candidates who are running for local office, political operatives who are trying to do direct mail pieces, and the whole process that's associated with campaigning. Everybody knows that politics is a blood sport, so I'm usually involved with some shady characters and some pretty above board characters at the same time. Nonetheless, I've always subscribed to the theory that if you don't touch the people, then you can't know who your supporting base is. You have to run a bottoms up campaign. You have to run a grassroots campaign if you really want to see some results. And by nature, I was always dealing with candidates who were running for office, and I just learned that everybody who loses assumed that the election was stolen. So I've heard that a lot. Memphis is a pretty storied town. We have some pretty brutal politics here. Um, Nonetheless, it's a Democrat county, majority Black city. Um, we have white Democrats, but it's a majority Black town. And for a reasonable portion of about a decade, the leadership in the county did not reflect the citizenry of the number of people who turned out. So we had largely Republican leadership, despite having majority Democrat turnout. And our state legislature is constructed in a way that whoever is in control of the legislature is in control of the counting the votes locally. So our elections, though we are a Democrat city, the people who count the votes and oversee the elections are Republicans. So back in 2014, I was approached by a number of I think there were about 8 or 9 candidates who sued the county and the election commission, insisting that their election results had been stolen. We had some people with some household names that were really solid candidates. They didn't win. They couldn't win the countywide seats, and the Republicans swept about 9 or 10 seats in a Democrat county. And that didn't make sense to me, but I know that most candidates, they like to just put flyers in people's cars, go to Kroger and somehow think that materializes in the people who vote. And that's just not the case. Me being a person who is looking at people's voting patterns. So because I'm a software developer, a number of those people came to me, and I was like, you probably just lost. I really, that was my expectation, that they probably lost. We had some bad candidates too. So, everybody thinks that they can just hop in a race and win. I, as a consolation prize, I just said, I'm a software guy. I'll take a look at the code. And I did a collaboration project with blackboxvoting.org. Bev Harris, she gave me a lot of cases that were from Shelby County in 2010. And I was able to use my financial background and my software background to examine and kick the tires of this system that we still use. And we will vote on this same software that I'm discussing. We'll vote on that in the November election here. So I looked at that software. I found some very disturbing things inside of it. I didn't reverse engineer it. I did it all legal. So I, figured out if you were going to cheat an election, what would you need? Kind of like a project as a software developer. And I determined what I needed in order to have some proficiency in this was to count people like money. And, I was certain that wasn't going to be the case. Certainly we're not counting, as one person, one vote. We're definitely not counting people like cents on the dollar. So I went and looked at the architecture and the structure of the way the databases were formed in the software was formed, and I found out it actually does count us like money. And that definitely eviscerates a one person, one vote scenario, because you can, as Andrea said, you can be 1/1000th of a vote, 1/100th of a vote, 1/1 millionth of a vote, or you can be 1.9 of a vote. You can be almost 2 votes if if I so chose to set the system to count you that way. I didn't think it was a fluke. I thought that was definitely intentional because it was a structural um, design in the application. So I did a little bit more digging, and I found out that what I was observing was a feature. It wasn't a bug. It actually had a name, and that name was a weighted election. And there was some obscure reason that people said to put it in there. They was talking about homeowners associations where if you have 2.3 acres of land and I have 1.7 acres of land and you have more acres, so your vote should count as much as mine. And you just imagine a little black kid like me who knows about the three-fifths compromise and thinking that 0.6 is three-fifths of a person. Um, that ain't a good number to be. And then to see that that is literally in the system and it's counting, it has the capacity to count all of its citizens that way, then that is certainly a problem. So what I did was I tried to figure out a way to demonstrate that, and I created a proof of concept to just show that it does work that way. And I kind of travel now talking about that concept. But one of the things I wanted to do was not be demoralized by it. I wanted to know how I could combat it. And I started looking for ways to interrupt such a maligned attack like that. And I studied, the field, and I went to see, when I was going to attack, my threat vector was at the central tabulator. And what I learned was individual returns are coming in on election night. We just don't see them. We just see the one big total at the end of the night that just shows two candidates and two totals. But if you are like in Memphis, we have 166 precincts. Well, those two totals are divided up by 166 because each precinct had an election result in each of them. So what I did was I used my predictions program to show me a precinct, and I waited till the next election. So 2015 came around, and I went for the high population areas because if you're going to play around with an election, you have to have some votes to play around with. So my predictions program showed me a high traffic area. I went to that high traffic area and I took out my BlackBerry phone. Yes, I still carry a BlackBerry. But I took out my BlackBerry and I took a picture of the poll tape. And that's the poll tape that Lulu was showing you guys. And if you just consider that is some data that is committed to the record. It's printed out from the machines. If you just imagine that the machine is a cash register at the grocery store, it's the receipt that it printed out that showed you what you purchased. And at the end of the night, all of those totals get sent to a central location where they get added together where you see that one number. Nonetheless, those are enshrined into the record if you capture it. Most people don't look at those poll tapes. They just wait for the one big number to come out and then they go away. Like that for election integrity, the election starts on election night. Doesn't end on election night. But for most voters, it ends on election night when you see who the winner is. So I continued my work through, and about 3 days later, I asked for the precinct level results that were tabulated. And I wanted to check those precinct level totals against the hard record cash register receipt that I had, right? It's frozen in time. I caught it on election night. Those totals were then transferred somewhere and aggregated up. And then they were broken down again to show me where the totals had landed. And that 548 precinct total that Lulu showed you had been reduced to 330. And that was exactly 40% of the value that had been lost from that precinct. So if you want to do the math, 3/5, 6, and 660 is 0.6. So that was my first thought. Oh my God, it wasn't the case. We see it right here. That 548 was reduced to 330 votes. If you just look at the top line. So just imagine if the machine dropped votes in multiple places. Then what you have is 330 people. Well, the balance of that was at 218 people, their votes didn't count. They couldn't have been counted because they were not tallied. And the 106, the 51, the 102, and the 64 is just where that 330 was lost from, right? So if you tell a candidate, hey, you got 170, you got 160, 106 votes, and you really got 175, he's going to say, well, I won that precinct. Well, I won it handily. And that is really disturbing when you cannot authenticate a total. So what I did was the natural thing to do. I was a citizen at the time, and I went to the county election commission, and one of the candidates who ran, and this was the person who pulled me aside in 2014, she kind of grabbed my ankle and didn't want to let me go. We kind of fought like brothers and sisters. Her name is Wanda Halbert. And she took that poll tape, she wanted to allege all these irregularities and, what she saw on the TV and a bunch of stuff that wasn't evidentiary. It wasn't evidence, right? So, she was talking about confidence, and I was like, I don't really care about confidence. I care about evidence, and this poll tape is evidence. And in our Tennessee code, it's called prima facie evidence. It is the record. And those by state law have to be signed, and those have to be kept for 90 days in municipal elections and 22 months for federal elections. So I literally fought with her, and I said, just take the poll tape. No lawyer would take her case. They didn't want to touch it. The laws are so stringent. You have to have, 50 days to prove that the proprietary software that they're not going to give you access to was so significantly flawed that it changed the results. But you're never going to be able to examine the results in the first place. So it's a hung jury, and it's never going to go anywhere. But she took this poll tape, and she just basically told the judge, they said 548 people voted on election night, and only 330 counted. And the judge sided with her. He said, somebody's got some explaining. And once he sent it, I guess the next level would be summary judgment. But once he did, the pendulum swung for the first time where someone had evidence that something was wrong. And this wasn't fraction magic. I would clarify. They'll come after me. I'm a sitting commissioner now. But it wasn't fraction magic. It was just a basic, the computer is dumb and it didn't count. Computers do fail. Just imagine how many times you wanted to throw your laptop out the window. They fail and they get viruses regularly. But these particular machines, that they're not like laptops. They are computers, but they're considerably inferior to something like an iPad 1. The amount of technology that goes into them is not like what you use with a smartphone or a laptop. So Wanda Halbert, she gets the summary judgment, and they just run out the clock, and she kind of loses patience and can't afford to keep her lawsuit going. And they settle for some undisclosed terms of an agreement, and I never heard about it. But what happened was Bloomberg Business Week came to write about it, and they made it the cover story because that was and the reporter said it, that was the only time that they actually had some empirical evidence to show that somebody actually found something that was wrong. And they wrote about it. They pressed the election administrator to quantify what happened. There were about 22 precincts, but they were only willing to write about 4. So Lulu is correct in the 4, that she said that 4 was what was written in the story. But internal emails had it where they were trying to figure out, and they basically didn't know what counted and what didn't get counted. And that kind of highlights why the citizens need to kind of step up and police the republic, and how it's not all doom and gloom, because I had found literally the worst thing I could ever see in an election system. But my response was to go and figure out how I can mitigate that. And that mitigation was through this poll tape exercise. And now what you see is organizations like Lulu, see something, say something is phenomenal. That's the illustrious Andrew Miller's idea. And the poll tape exercise was added to that because this is something that you would see that you could actually say something about. And the long story short was the election administrator at the time, the election was in October, and he decided it was time to retire in December. And for about a decade, the legislatures, the candidates, they were suing over and over again. They gave him a vote of no confidence, but he had a 3-2 Republican majority, so they would never fire him. But they called for him to be investigated, for him to be fired, for him to be jailed. They said he had his thumb on the scale, and nobody could land a solid blow against him. But this poll tape was so evidentiary that without an explanation or without knowing it and a citizen having to show you, then that means they didn't properly audit the election. So he decided it was time to retire. And that was in 2015. And we had a 2016 election, which is not our local municipal elections, but 2018 was the next chance that all of those seats were back up for grabs. And what had been a Republican sweep 2 times in a row turned out to be a Democrat sweep. Now think about this, complete Republican domination, 2 cycles in a row. And the 3rd cycle after the guy that everybody believed had his thumb on the scale, then it was a complete shift where all of the seats that were in Republican rule were now controlled by Democrats. And the majority of those candidates who won reflected the voting populace. Most people who vote in Memphis, Tennessee are Black females. And many of the candidates who won were Black females. So it was a straight girl power tsunami. It was wonderful to see the electorate, the representation actually look like the number of people who turn out to vote. But also it was in the face of knowing that there could be systematic changes that could really thwart the confidence and the evidence at the same time. But when you consider that this poll tape exercise can mitigate some of that, it doesn't cure it all, but it does mitigate and give citizens something that they can do. And by law, a number of states, they do require that these poll tapes are placed. It is something that citizens are really getting behind, and CSA is really a powerful engine. You know, what Deepak is doing is phenomenal. And I had to tell Andrea even as early as today, this is like one of the most brilliant ideas I have seen, where you really get the public to document the record in real time. That is just unheard of. Candidates don't do it. They don't understand it. And to have somebody who has been on the ground organizing, and Andrea Miller, to have the foresight to see a way to document the record, it's nothing short of phenomenal. I'm definitely happy to be involved with it. I'm happy that some of that mechanism is something that I learned in my journey through, and now I'm a sitting election commissioner. And I'm getting beat up really bad. But I wanted to get in a position where I could advocate with some actual authority. And that's what I'm doing now. But the last point that I would make is Wanda Halbert, she won her next election, and she had more votes than any other candidate by the same people who had allegedly not elected her twice, once in 2014, once in 2015. She got elected with the most votes in the county from the same people that seemingly may have rejected her, if you want to believe that, but seemingly rejected her in 2 election cycles. And her budget, get this, is somewhere close to $1 billion in authority. So her revenue goals are somewhere around $975 million. She's the county court clerk. When you get a marriage license, a business license, your tags, any type of record that the citizen does, or they go to apply for, she is in charge of that revenues. And that is definitely something that you can appoint positions, you can have salary positions, you can appoint your CAO, you can hire people, you can contract people to do services, and that will be why somebody wouldn't want to give up a seat like that. So it's definitely a different perspective if you look at it from the perspective that I did, that basically asks the question, does anybody have an incentive to remain in power? And that answer is a resounding yes. So you would see suppression and people of color being not litmus test, but put through some really serious hurdles to exercise their authority and their majority right, and also just people in less affluent areas, because Memphis is a really nice melting pot when you get in the inner city. So a lot of those people is really more of a class thing. The number of people, the have-nots, who really can benefit from their county government, and in most jurisdictions, county governments are the largest employers. So
Benny, I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
People are saying, and again, this may be kind of a Benny Lulu thing.
Okay.
How can they, number one, do all jurisdictions, will all precincts post their poll tapes? Is there some kind of law, or can some do, some don't? And then the other question is, how can they be part of a squad that is collecting these poll tapes?
So I'll take the first part, Lulu, you take the second part.
All right.
So jurisdictions are different, but most states, if the state has it in the statute, it applies for the entire state. And from what I have seen, the majority of states that I've been involved with since 2016, so it's about 4 years that I've been involved with, the majority of those states have statutory requirements that poll tapes be, it's called the announcement of results in some places. The announcement of the results or poll tapes. And you would have to look at your state statutes, but it's very clear. It's in the section of the statute that talks about the closing of the polls and what the procedures are. And that basically instructs the poll workers to tabulate the returns and post them in the public for the public to see. And Lulu, you can take the second half. So definitely the states do have it. There may be some that don't, but it'd be a few.
So we definitely want you to get involved. I don't know if I can, let me see if I can find myself in these screens. Am I back here? Okay. There we go. So we want you to get involved, and there's a couple ways to do it. I think the easiest is probably to email me, and I put my email in the chat, and I'm going to put it in there again, contact@smartelections.us.
And everybody, we will email you all the contact information, links to the PowerPoints. The PowerPoints will be in our Slack channel. You will get all that tomorrow.
And then the first thing to do is probably go to this. This is the YouTube show that we did on this show. It's an hour-long video, and it kind of goes through this in more detail. One of the things that's really great in that is we had Lynn Bernstein on, and she's the head of Transparent Elections North Carolina, and they are already like well underway. And she talks about kind of all the things that she's been through to try to get this happening. When she tried in the primary, she almost got arrested because she went and tried to photograph the poll tapes and they would not let her. And so again, this is it's so important to find out, as Benny was saying, what are the statutes in your state and even in your county? They might be different. Lynn said that in North Carolina, the statutes about whether or not they have to post the poll tapes vary from county to county. So another thing that you could do, say you didn't want to go out and actually photograph poll tapes because it's something you have to do late at night in person, but you want to help with data, we need to create a database of all of these different statutes state by state. And some of it's going to require online research or actually like calling up the boards of elections, the state board of elections in different states. I checked with Verified Voting last night to find out, do they have a database of polling tape regulations? If anyone did, I thought they would, but they told me no, they don't. And they don't have an intern or volunteer crew who can do this. So we need you. So email me or let Andrea know if you think like a group of 3 or 4 people could get together and start to work on this database of statutes. That's going to be incredibly important. If you think you want to do a squad, even do like one county and even just take a few and get started. Like, you know, we have 3 people and we're each going to do like 3 or 4 locations and just get started. That would be fantastic.
And Lulu, our folks are used to doing that. We have a research team on our phone bank team. We have attorneys on our teams. And so the attorneys, they are ideal for that. Normally, whenever we go into a state, we send the attorneys in first.
We need you. We so need you. So Andrea, let's you and I also be in touch, and
right.
We'll figure out, you know, where we can, you know, plug these resources in. We're so excited to be working with you.
All right, great, great, great. All right, this has been wonderful. It has been educational. Lulu, thank you so much. Benny, thank you so much for joining us. I have some information I want to give you. I want to give you a quick update on where we are with texting. And yeah, I think I might share my screen. I've got that screen up. So let me just show you where we are. It's pretty darn cool. All right, now show this slide, you little monster. Right, there we go. Normally it doesn't want to show the slide I'm on. It did. All right, now North Carolina is launched with 702,000 cell numbers. South Carolina just launched this afternoon, 395,000 cell numbers. Alabama, we are waiting for script approval, 462,000 numbers. Mississippi, we are waiting. Yes, Mississippi is in the house. We are waiting for them to finalize the script. We have 175,000 cell numbers for Mississippi. Georgia and Florida are each over 700,000, and Arizona is 224,000. I will tell you now, we will need out-of-state volunteers for Georgia, Florida, South Carolina may need some help as well. So when those opportunities come up, after the local and state people have started their work and are comfortable, we will invite our out-of-state support team to come and help them finish all those numbers. I gave a donation of $10,000 on Tuesday to Reverend Leo Woodbury, who is organizing rides to the polls in South Carolina. They took a caravan of 30 cars with our Reclaim Our Vote magnets to the polls. We just got their Give a Ride software. I will be training them on how to use their Give a Ride software so that they will be able to deploy that to their drivers. And I also made a $10,000 donation to Southern Echo, who is working on getting PPEs to their voters because it looks very much like many Mississippi voters are going to have to vote on Election Day. Mississippi is absentee in-person voting. They did not allow COVID-19 as an excuse. Voters can be seniors, disabled, or literally have a note from their doctors saying that they are highly susceptible and vulnerable to COVID-19. Everybody else will be at the polls on Election Day. So they are looking at figuring out how they can organize rides to the polls. So we are helping our on the ground partners. We will be delivering software to them and anything and everything that they need. This, as I said, is going to be a glorious election. And remember, our pivot on November 6th is making voting a constitutional right. Every citizen of the United States of voting age shall have the fundamental right to vote in any public election in the jurisdiction in which they reside. That will become our new mantra. We will fix this problem once and for all. Oh, and by the way, the notorious RVG was in South Carolina with Reverend Woodbury this morning, and then she rolled into Augusta, Georgia at about 1:30 this afternoon. And my board member, Katie, is actually driving. So I gotta love my board. She's like, my driver is sick. Okay, I will go down and I will drive the RV. She's like, how different can it be from a 19-foot ice cream truck? So we have a lot of fun. Nancy, Suzanne, anything else you want to say to our volunteers and or our wonderful guest?
Well, this is wonderful. And we are compiling with one of our volunteer attorneys, Tina Egan, compiling a group of attorneys. We're going to put out an e-blast to all our volunteers and ask them to sign up if they are attorneys to help with CSA, to help do a survey of the key counties that we've identified in our target states. So people who are attorneys will help. That's what Andrea was referring to.
Oh, and then thanks, Nancy. And I see a note in the chat. How did the postcarding go? We are officially, let me go look it up so I'm not making up numbers. We are officially at 6,400,182 postcard addresses delivered and postcards sent. We are still going to be doing phone banking. We are not shifting from phone banking to texting. We are doing both. There are always far more phone numbers than there are cell numbers. So in spite of the fact that I may have 700,000 cell numbers, I have 9 million phone numbers. So we do not stop phone banking. We are also adding texting. So we will be going all the way to November 3rd if our cell numbers hold out. With our phone banking, remember, many rural voters do not have mobile phones because there is no cell service in many of our rural Black Belt areas. These are our most vulnerable voters, so we will always be on the phone. And by the way, Mississippi is finalizing their phone bank script. I will have Mississippi phone banks up by the weekend. So we will be able to call our voters in the great state of Mississippi. So I think that would be, oh, you're going to want to know how many phone calls you made this week. You were great. You were fabulous. Now, this week you made 78,244 phone calls. Thank you very much for all of our phone bankers. We are absolutely delighted that you were able to do that. It was wonderful. And one of our new billboard opportunities is I'm buying sidewalk and bench, bus bench billboards in definitely the city of Charlotte. And I'm going to be looking at what other cities we can do this in for See Something, Say Something, because the art that Justin delivered literally just explodes all over the screen. So this is what will appear on park benches and sidewalks in urban areas. I mean, isn't that cool? It just grabs you.
Andrea, if I could jump in here very quickly, it's Suzanne.
Yes.
As you can see, this is an incredible project. It's moving very quickly into all 8 of our target states, and we urge you to contribute to the Safe Rides and Billboard campaign. The links are in the chat. This money, I'm telling you, is being put to good use, as you can see, as quickly as we can raise it. So thank you everybody who's done it. And for all of you who are California volunteers, we have a special rally this Saturday, and there's a link that's in the chat, but it'll also be in the notes tomorrow. This is the time when we get to celebrate all our good work. So we hope to see you there.
And Reverend Leo Woodbury will be joining us.
Yes.
All right. Okay, it is 9:14. This was quite an amazing session. I am going to stop the recording.